Welcome to Mystery Cafe, your ultimate stop for gripping detective stories, chilling mysteries, and unforgettable investigations. Here, every video serves a fresh dose of suspense, shocking twists, and cases that challenge your inner detective. From classic whodunits to modern crime stories, we bring the world of mystery straight to your screen, where every clue matters and no secret stays buried for long. Before we start unraveling today's mystery, we'd love to know, where are you watching from? Globe showing Europe, Africa. Drop your country, city, or stay in the comments, and let's see how far the Mystery Cafe family reaches. Magnifying glass tilted right.
The Midnight Express. Chapter 1, Smoke over Chicago. The city of Chicago never truly slept, but in the autumn of 1874 its heartbeat was the rail yard. Black smoke curled from iron chimneys and drifted into a sky already dimmed by soot. Bells clanged, whistles shrieked, and the endless groan of locomotives echoed across the prairie horizon. Trains were the lifeblood of the growing nation, carrying soldiers, bankers, immigrants, and fortunes in coin across vast distances. They were also, as Allan Pinkerton knew too well, irresistible prey for thieves. It was mid-morning when a messenger in railway livery climbed the narrow stairs to Pinkerton's Dearborn office, breathless from urgency. He handed over an envelope stamped with the seal of the Chicago and Northwestern Railway. Inside, the letter was blunt. Mr. Pinkerton, intelligence has reached us that the upcoming Midnight Express, departing Saturday for Omaha with a government payroll aboard, will be attacked. We require your agency's immediate assistance in ensuring its safe passage. Discretion paramount. It bore the signature of Charles Winthrop, a senior executive. Pinkerton read it twice, jaw tightening. Train robberies had increased over the past decade, gangs striking in the night, rails sabotaged, passengers terrorized. But this letter hinted at more than mere banditry. The specific mention of the Midnight Express, a schedule known to few, suggested betrayal from within. He summoned his sons, William and Robert, to the map table. The Midnight Express departs Saturday evening. It will carry coin, bonds, and payroll strongboxes. Someone knows, and someone talks. We must be aboard. Robert leaned over the map. The line crosses prairie wide open to ambush. If outlaws ride from the timber, the train will be exposed. But for them to know which train to strike, they have eyes inside the company. Pinkerton nodded gravely. An informant, perhaps an officer, perhaps a laborer bribed. The robbery cannot succeed without cooperation. That afternoon he walked through the vast terminal where engines idled like steel beasts. Winthrop awaited him in a smoke-filled office above the yard. He was a tall, anxious man with pince-nez spectacles, his fine suit dampened with sweat. "Mr. Pinkerton," he greeted, "you must understand, if word of this leaks, our reputation collapses. The Midnight Express is our flagship run. If bandits succeed..." Pinkerton cut him off. "They will not. But I must know who has access to the manifest. Who knew the shipment would be aboard?" Winthrop hesitated, then admitted the truth. "Only a handful, myself, 2 accountants, and the chief of security. Yet rumors spread among yard workers already. It is as if someone whispers deliberately." Pinkerton's dark eyes narrowed. "Then the rot is not rumor, but conspiracy. I'll have men among the laborers tonight. Lantern signals, shadowed corners, conversations in saloons, I will know who speaks to whom." As dusk deepened, Pinkerton donned a simple workman's coat and cap, blending into the yard with practiced ease. He walked among the crew's coupling cars, listened to laughter spilling from taverns nearby, and observed small details others missed. A lantern blinked twice at the edge of the coal shed, then once more, a coded signal. A figure detached from the shadows, speaking hurriedly to a man in a long coat. Too far to hear, but close enough to note posture and urgency. When they parted, Pinkerton's agent trailed the stranger into the smoke. By midnight, the report was clear. A laborer named Caleb Marsh had been meeting outsiders for weeks, flashing coin beyond his pay. He drank heavily at the Red Clover Saloon, boasting of trains fat with government gold. Pinkerton listened in person, seated inconspicuously at a nearby table. Marsh, already drunk, slurred to his companions, "Saturday's run, boys, the Midnight Express, worth more than your lives combined." His companions laughed uneasily, but their eyes glittered with greed. Pinkerton returned to his office before dawn, recording every observation in his precise hand. The pattern emerged as surely as tracks across prairie. Marsh was a conduit, passing secrets from someone higher in the company to outlaws waiting beyond. But who supplied him? The next morning, Pinkerton met again with Winthrop. "Marsh must be watched but not seized," he instructed. "If we close the net too soon, the snake escapes. We need the head, not the tail." Winthrop wrung his hands. "But the express leaves in 2 nights. Can you guarantee its safety?" Pinkerton's reply was steady, unshaken. "I do not guarantee. I act." That evening he convened his core operatives in the back room of a warehouse. Maps were unrolled, lanterns trimmed low. "We ride the express ourselves," he declared. "We scatter among passengers, businessmen, soldiers, widows, gamblers. They will not know us. Some will guard the cargo car, others the sleeper compartments. Watch for signals on the prairie, lanterns, bonfires, tampered rails. And above all, watch the passengers. One of them may be feeding word to the bandits even as the wheels turn." The men nodded, seasoned agents who trusted his judgment. For many, this was not their first trained defense. But all felt the gravity. A single misstep could mean dozens of lives lost and fortunes stolen. Later, walking the rails alone beneath a sky thick with stars, Pinkerton reflected on the danger. Trains symbolized progress, yet also vulnerability, long iron snakes rushing through wilderness, bound by tracks, unable to turn aside. To guard them was to guard the artery of the nation. And if the Midnight Express fell, it would embolden every outlaw gang from Kansas to Montana. He lit his pipe, the glow briefly illuminating his weathered features. In the stillness he resolved that come Saturday night, he would be aboard that train. He would stand between the bandits and the innocent, between conspiracy and order. The city exhaled black smoke into the heavens, unaware that a storm was gathering not in clouds but in men's hearts. And Allan Pinkerton, watchful as ever, braced himself for the hunt. Chapter 2, Shadows in the Rail Yard. The Chicago rail yard sprawled like a city within a city, endless lines of tracks converging into a maze of smoke, steel, and restless men. By day it was a chorus of clanging hammers, shrieking whistles, and shouted orders. But by night it became something else entirely. Lanterns burned low, shadows lengthened across idle cars, and whispers carried farther than the sound of steel. To Allan Pinkerton, the yard was both stage and snare, and tonight it promised to reveal the shape of the conspiracy threatening the Midnight Express. Pinkerton arrived near dusk, wearing the rough clothes of a yard foreman. At his side strode 2 of his most trusted men, McParlin and Jonas Clymer, both equally disguised. They entered as the shifts changed, mingling with workers whose faces were blackened with coal dust. The detective's gaze swept across the field of iron and smoke, noting small details, a man lingering too long by a signal post, another clutching a flask but scanning the yard instead of drinking, a cluster of laborers speaking with heads bent low. The intelligence gathered the previous night had pointed to Caleb Marsh, the loose-tongued laborer. Pinkerton knew better than to pounce on a single link. Marsh was a pawn, and pawns moved under orders. The real danger lay higher: who gave those orders, and why? He positioned himself where he could watch Marsh unseen. The man stumbled from the Red Clover saloon and swaggered through the yard with ale on his breath. He carried a lantern, its glow swaying in drunken arcs. Twice he paused, raising the light in deliberate sequence, one flash, a pause, then two. At once, Pinkerton's instincts sharpened. This was not the careless gesture of a drunk, it was a signal. Sure enough, from the far side of the yard a faint answering blink appeared. Pinkerton traced it to a figure cloaked in a heavy coat, lurking near the freight sheds. The exchange lasted only seconds, but it was enough. Marsh had confirmed communication with someone outside his circle of laborers. Pinkerton whispered instructions to Clymer: "Trail Marsh closely. See where he goes when the shift ends. Do not lose him, no matter how many alleys he takes." Then, turning to McParlin, he gestured toward the freight sheds. "We shadow the other." The pursuit carried them across a labyrinth of tracks. Engines hissed like beasts in their stalls, releasing clouds of steam that momentarily blinded them. When the vapor cleared, Pinkerton glimpsed the long-coated figure slipping inside a warehouse. The detective approached cautiously, crouching behind stacked timber. Through a crack in the boards he saw men gathered around a crate. They were not ordinary thieves. Their boots were polished, their clothes finer than laborers. One unrolled a map across the crate lid, the line of the railway marked clearly, with red ink circles along the route westward. Pinkerton strained to catch fragments of their conversation. Saturday. Midnight Express, signals before Joliet, detached the payroll car. The rest was muffled, but the meaning was clear enough. They intended not just to board, but to isolate the very car carrying the government gold. That required knowledge only insiders possessed: engineers, switchmen, perhaps even officials. He withdrew silently, pulling McParlin with him. "This is no gang of prairie bandits," he muttered. "They have maps, timetables, and precision. Someone within the company guides them." By midnight, Clymer returned with his report. Marsh had met two strangers in a back alley, passing them folded paper before retreating to his lodgings. Clymer had tried to follow the strangers, but they vanished into the warren of streets near the river. Still, the pattern was undeniable: inside information was flowing steadily outward. The following day, Pinkerton requested a private audience with Charles Winthrop, the railway executive. They met in Winthrop's office above the depot, the air heavy with the stink of coal and ink. Pinkerton laid a rough sketch of the red-marked map upon the desk. "Your enemies know not only the time of departure, but the points along the route where sabotage could succeed. This cannot come from drunken boasting alone. Someone close to you leaks it." Winthrop paled. "Impossible. The only men aware of the shipment are myself, Chief Security Officer Harrington, and two accountants sworn to secrecy." Pinkerton's gaze was steady. "Then one of them is compromised, or one of them speaks carelessly to ears too eager. I suggest you trust none, not even yourself. Silence is our only ally now." Winthrop swallowed hard, nodding. "What do you require?" "Access to the yard at all hours, and full authority aboard the express. I will place my men as passengers, disguised. We will observe every soul. And when the time comes, we will spring the trap." That night, Pinkerton returned to the yard with renewed focus. The lantern signals repeated again, though the figures were more cautious now. Clearly, the conspirators sensed attention tightening. He ordered his agents to intercept small details, chalk markings on posts, scratches in timber, whispers at tavern tables. Piece by piece, the puzzle began to take shape. One agent reported overhearing talk of the engineer, a mysterious leader orchestrating the plan. None seemed to know his true name. Some claimed he was a disgraced railway man with intimate knowledge of schedules. Others swore he was a former soldier who had turned his wartime skills to banditry. Whoever he was, his reputation lent fear to his men. Pinkerton noted the alias carefully. An unseen mastermind was always more dangerous than a visible one. By Friday, the yard pulsed with tension. Guards doubled their patrols, though Pinkerton suspected some might themselves be complicit. He moved through the shadows, ever watchful, noting how Marsh avoided his usual haunts and walked with guarded haste. The man's bravado had thinned, replaced by paranoia. That told Pinkerton the net was tightening. At dawn, Pinkerton gathered his agents one final time in a small rented room above a cobbler's shop. The air smelled of leather and lamp oil as they huddled around the table. He spoke plainly. "Tomorrow night, the express departs. The conspirators will strike. We will be aboard, hidden among passengers and guards alike. When they reveal themselves, we strike back harder." His men listened in silence, their faces set. They knew the stakes: a payroll meant for federal troops, fortunes entrusted by banks, the lives of passengers who believed themselves safe. Failure would ripple far beyond Chicago, emboldening every outlaw on the frontier. As the meeting broke, Pinkerton remained behind a moment, staring at the faint light creeping through the window. Shadows still lingered over the rail yard, thick with smoke and suspicion. Somewhere among the workers, among the officials, perhaps even among the passengers who had already purchased their tickets, the conspiracy waited. He clenched his fists. By the time the midnight express roared westward, the shadows would have names, and Allan Pinkerton would be there to drag them into the light. Chapter 3: The Midnight Departure. Saturday night came with a chill wind sweeping across Chicago, rattling telegraph wires and tugging at loose tarpaulins in the freight yard. The Midnight Express stood ready, its iron bulk gleaming under lantern light, steam hissing from the boiler like the breath of some massive creature. The city beyond seemed half asleep, but here, in the glow of coal and fire, anticipation was palpable. Men hurried with last-minute couplings and checks, while passengers clustered near the platform, their faces half hidden by mufflers and shadows. Allan Pinkerton arrived without ceremony. Dressed in plain traveler's clothes, he looked more like a merchant on business than the founder of a detective agency. Yet his eyes never rested, they swept the crowd, noting gestures, glances, and small exchanges others would ignore. His men filtered in separately, each adopting a role suited to disguise. McParlin appeared as a salesman burdened with sample cases. Jonas Clymer took on the guise of a Civil War veteran, walking with a convincing limp. Another agent played the part of a newspaperman, clutching a leather satchel stuffed with blank paper. Together they blended into the throng, invisible as ordinary souls. The passenger list, obtained through discreet channels, was eclectic. A pair of army officers, escorting sealed documents, sat stiff-backed in the waiting room. A widow in morning dress clutched a black parasol, her veil concealing most of her features. A bearded banker traveled with two clerks and a heavy chest rumored to hold bonds. A journalist from St. Louis smoked nervously, scribbling notes even before departure. Several drifters loitered near the freight cars, claiming to be migrant workers. Each face told a story, but some stories were false, and Pinkerton intended to uncover which. At precisely 11:45, the conductor's whistle shrieked. "All aboard," he cried, his voice cutting through the yard. Passengers filed onto the cars, ladies escorted by porters, men carrying cases, guards taking positions near the payroll compartment. Pinkerton waited until last, stepping into the second-class coach where he could watch both forward and rear cars. The door slammed shut. A moment later, with a groan and a jolt, the Midnight Express rolled into motion. Inside, the train was a world unto itself. Lamps swung gently with the movement, casting shifting shadows on polished wood panels. The rhythmic clatter of wheels on rails filled every pause in conversation. The air smelled of coal smoke mixed with perfume, tobacco, and damp wool. Pinkerton settled into a corner seat, his hat brim low, notebook hidden in his coat pocket. He appeared relaxed, but his attention sharpened with every passing mile. McParlin took a seat in the sleeper car, feigning interest in the widow's plight. He noted how she avoided direct answers about her origins, her voice smooth but guarded. Clymer struck up talk with the army officers, listening for stray comments about security arrangements. The newspaperman agent roamed the aisles freely, excused by his role, noting which passengers shifted uneasily when guards passed. Every move was observed, every twitch catalogued. By midnight, the train thundered westward across the prairie. The city lights faded behind, swallowed by endless dark. Through the windows, stars glittered coldly over flat fields stretching to the horizon. Occasionally, a lonely farmhouse lamp flickered in the distance, but mostly the landscape lay silent, broken only by the cry of an owl or the wind whistling through telegraph poles. Pinkerton studied the conductor, a round-bellied man with bushy sideburns. He moved through the cars with mechanical efficiency, but his eyes lingered too long on the chest carried by the banker's clerks. Was it greed? Curiosity? Or complicity? The detective marked it in his mind, another thread in the growing tapestry of suspicion. Not long after, a porter delivered refreshments. Pinkerton noticed the exchange of a folded slip between the porter and one of the supposed migrant workers seated near the rear. The movement was subtle, a passing of hand to hand disguised as the return of change. Pinkerton's pulse quickened. That note would have to be recovered. He signaled McParlin with the faint lift of his cane as the porter exited. The agent followed discreetly. In the dining car, conversations hummed. The banker lectured his clerks about discipline, his voice pompous and loud. The journalist scribbled furiously, sketching caricatures of the wealthy passengers. The widow ordered tea, her hands steady despite the rocking of the train. Pinkerton entered quietly, scanning the room. He caught sight of Jonas Clymer whispering to the officers about troop movements, a ruse to test their willingness to speak carelessly. They revealed little, but one officer seemed oddly restless, glancing often toward the baggage car. Pinkerton filed it away. Shortly after 2 in the morning, as the express roared through open prairie, the first sign of sabotage appeared. A lantern swung outside in the distance, flashing a sequence, one long, 2 short. It was the same code Pinkerton had observed in the yard days before. He leaned closer to the window, narrowing his eyes. Ahead, by the faint gleam of moonlight, he spotted a figure near the tracks. But before he could act, the conductor entered, urging passengers to remain calm, just a signal from the next station. Pinkerton's instincts rebelled. That lantern was no official code. He rose quietly, slipping into the narrow vestibule between cars. Through the night air, he glimpsed sparks near the rail ahead. Men working hurriedly, loosening bolts. Sabotage meant derailment. His hand shot to the emergency cord, pulling hard. The brakes screeched, throwing passengers against seats as the train shuddered to a halt. Chaos erupted, shouts, questions, cries of alarm. Pinkerton ignored them, pushing past startled guards toward the front. His agents converged swiftly, weapons drawn. Outside, the saboteurs fled into the tall grass, leaving tools behind. Pinkerton examined the rail by lantern light, bolts half removed, rails ready to give way at the next mile. Without intervention, the express would have been wrecked, its riches scattered for the taking. Back inside, suspicion turned inward. How had the saboteurs known precisely where to strike? Their signal had been timed to the train's minute of passage. Someone aboard must be feeding them updates. Pinkerton scanned the faces of passengers. Fear and outrage masked guilt easily, but one pair of eyes, calm amid the storm, lingered too long on his. He recognized the calculation there. The enemy was not only outside, it rode within. As dawn crept over the prairie, the express resumed its course, every creak of wheels now weighted with tension. Pinkerton returned to his seat, his thoughts sharpening into steel. The conspiracy had shown its hand. The journey ahead promised danger, and the traitor's mask would soon slip. The Midnight Express was no longer merely a train, it was a trap, and Pinkerton intended to be the one who closed it. Chapter 4, The First Strike. The Midnight Express hurtled westward again, the rhythm of its wheels pounding like a relentless drum. The saboteurs had been thwarted, but Allan Pinkerton knew the night's danger was far from ended. The rails had been tampered with, bolts loosened, and a coded lantern waved at precisely the right moment. That precision told him what he already suspected: someone aboard was in league with the conspirators. Dawn was still hours away, the prairie a vast sea of shadows under a cold moon. Inside the coaches, unease thickened. The banker clutched his chest of bonds as if brigands would storm the aisle at any moment. The widow kept her veil lowered, sipping tea as though unaffected by the chaos. The soldiers muttered about dishonor, cursing whoever dared tamper with government property. Yet Pinkerton observed that fear had not subdued everyone. Two passengers seemed unnaturally calm, their eyes sharp, their posture poised. He made note. He walked the length of the train, stopping in each car to speak quietly with his agents. McParlin reported that the slip of paper passed by the porter had been intercepted. It bore a simple instruction: stop at signal. Await riders. Proof, at last, of collusion within the train itself. Jonas Clymer confirmed that the army officer named Price had asked suspiciously detailed questions about which car held the payroll. Pinkerton's lips tightened. One of these men, or perhaps more than one, was part of the machine feeding the outlaws. By 2:30 in the morning, the train approached a narrow trestle bridge spanning a shallow ravine. The wind howled through the girders, making the whole structure groan. Pinkerton stepped onto the vestibule between cars, his coat whipping in the gale. Lantern in hand, he scanned the rails below. Nothing seemed disturbed, yet instinct told him otherwise. He crouched low, his keen eyes following the gleam of the tracks. There, scratches near the bolts, as though a wrench had been turned and abandoned in haste. He rapped the side of the car with his cane, signaling the engineer to slow. The train eased across the bridge with a screech of brakes. Passengers cursed, jarred from their seats, but Pinkerton remained steady. He had prevented a disaster by seconds. Once across, the express gained speed again, plunging into prairie darkness. Pinkerton re-entered the coach, his presence calming the panicked murmurs. "Remain seated," he instructed firmly. "You are safe for now. No one leaves their car until I say." His tone left no room for argument. Moments later, the whistle shrieked twice, an urgent warning from the engine. Pinkerton rushed forward, boots pounding the narrow corridor. The engineer leaned from the cab, his face pale. "Riders," he shouted over the roar of the boiler. From the prairie emerged dark shapes, galloping hard, their silhouettes etched by moonlight. 6 horsemen, masks pulled tight, rifles glinting. They closed swiftly, spurring their mounts alongside the speeding train. One fired into the air, a crack that split the night. Another tossed a grappling hook onto the baggage car, hauling himself upward with terrifying agility. The attack had begun. Pinkerton barked orders. McParlin and Clymer drew their revolvers, racing to the baggage car where the payroll was stored. Guards inside braced for the assault, bolting the doors. Passengers screamed as bullets shattered windows. The express roared on, unable to halt without inviting capture. Pinkerton climbed to the roof of the car, crouching low as wind whipped around him. The world blurred, stars overhead, prairie streaming below. Ahead, two bandits crawled across the roof toward the baggage car. Pinkerton advanced silently, revolver steady. He fired once, the first outlaw toppled, flung into darkness with a cry swallowed by the wind. The second turned, pistol raised, but Pinkerton lunged, tackling him. They rolled against the roof's curve, perilously close to the edge. With brute force, the detective wrenched the weapon away, then hurled the man off with grim finality. Below, the horseman pressed closer. One leapt from his saddle, catching the rail of the last coach. Passengers shrieked as he swung aboard. McParlin intercepted him, striking with the butt of his revolver. The intruder collapsed, disarmed before he could reach the sleepers. But the fiercest push came at the baggage car. Two outlaws reached its roof, dropping smoke canisters into the ventilation grates. Inside, guards coughed and staggered, eyes burning. The robbers prepared to cut through the lock. Clymer shot upward from below, bullets sparking against iron. One attacker fell back, but the other persisted, hacking with an axe at the latch. Pinkerton arrived, leaping down from the adjacent roof. His fist cracked across the outlaw's jaw, sending him sprawling. With swift efficiency, he doused the smoke canisters and ordered the guards to fan fresh air through the vents. "Stay alert," he commanded. "They will try again." The train thundered on. Horsemen fell back, their mounts tiring, but two persisted. One clung to the side ladder, firing wildly into the cars. Another circled ahead, signaling with a lantern, the same code seen before. Pinkerton realized in an instant, the outlaws weren't finished. They meant to force the engineer into halting at a predetermined point further west, where reinforcements surely waited. He raced forward, scaling the coal tender into the engine cab. The engineer gripped the throttle with white knuckles, fear etched across his face. "They signal to stop at the water tower ahead," he cried. "Then we do the opposite," Pinkerton growled. "Full steam. Do not stop unless I command it." The outlaw ahead waved frantically, expecting compliance. Instead, the express roared past, furnace blazing, pistons pounding like thunder. The bandit signal vanished in smoke and sparks. Deprived of their ambush site, the riders broke off, fading into the darkness. By dawn, the prairie gave way to rolling hills, golden light breaking across the horizon. The passengers, shaken but alive, whispered of miracles. The guards tended their wounds, McParlin and Clymer reloaded revolvers with grim faces. Pinkerton, weary but unbowed, stood at the front of the baggage car, scanning the horizon. The attack had been repelled, but it was no victory yet. The saboteurs had timed their strikes perfectly, aided by signals from within. Someone aboard was still feeding information to the enemy. The riders had withdrawn, but only to regroup. The midnight express was not yet safe. Pinkerton returned to the passenger cars, eyes narrowing as he studied each face anew. The widow, serene behind her veil. The banker, sweating over his chest. The soldier, restless as ever. The journalist scribbling notes with unsettling calm. One of them was a traitor. One of them was the engineer, the mastermind. The first strike had been weathered. The true test was still ahead. Chapter 5: The Masked Bandits. The sun had risen, but the warmth of dawn did little to ease the tension aboard the Midnight Express. After the attempted sabotage and the midnight assault, every creak of the car, every gust of wind through the window seemed charged with threat. The passengers wore drawn expressions, whispering in corners, glancing at their fellow travelers with suspicion. Pinkerton had kept order with calm authority, but he knew the danger was far from past. The train pressed onward, steaming through endless prairie now lit by gold. At small towns it thundered by without slowing, as instructed, the engineer keeping his hand steady on the throttle. Guards remained stationed at the baggage car, rifles propped against their knees. McParlin prowled the aisles, observing interactions, while Jonas Clymer lingered near the rear to ensure no one tampered with couplings. Pinkerton himself moved constantly, never remaining long in one place, his eyes sifting details like a hawk watching a field for movement. By mid-morning, he noticed restlessness among certain passengers. The widow in black, still shrouded in her veil, seemed untroubled by the chaos of the night. Too untroubled. The journalist filled page after page with hurried scrawls, though when Pinkerton discreetly checked his paper later, he found lines of nonsense, meaningless words, perhaps code. The banker sweated more than ever, snapping at his clerks, insisting the chest be checked every half hour. Each mannerism hinted at secrets, though none yet revealed their true shape. It was near noon when the next blow struck. The express rounded a bend where the prairie gave way to wooded hills. Suddenly, from the tree-line, riders burst forth. A dozen this time, not 6. Faces masked with bandanas, hats pulled low, rifles gleaming. Their horses pounded across the open ground, drawing level with the train. Shots cracked, glass shattered, passengers screamed. The masked bandits had returned in force. Pinkerton leapt to action. "Stations," he barked. His men moved instantly, McParlin diving into the baggage car to reinforce guards, Clymer heading for the rear coach to hold the coupling. Pinkerton himself climbed onto the platform between cars, revolver drawn, coat whipping in the wind. The outlaws attacked with frightening coordination. 2 threw grappling hooks, hauling themselves onto the roofs. Another pair fired at the guards through shattered windows. Riders pressed close to the engineer's cab, shouting for him to halt. A masked figure in a long coat led them, his voice carrying above the roar of hooves and wheels. "Stop the train. Obey or be slaughtered." That voice was deep, commanding, practiced. Pinkerton felt a jolt of recognition. Was this the engineer, the phantom mastermind whispered about in the yards? The figure moved with authority, directing his men with precise signals. This was no common bandit. This was a strategist. Pinkerton fired, driving back one outlaw scrambling up the ladder. Another lunged from horseback, trying to swing into the rear car. Clymer met him with a rifle but to the chest, sending him sprawling. Inside the coaches, passengers huddled low as bullets tore through wood and fabric. The widow remained eerily calm, her hands folded, while the journalist scribbled even faster, as though recording the attack itself. On the roof, 2 bandits advanced toward the baggage car, revolvers blazing. Guards fired upward, but the train's rocking made aim difficult. Pinkerton climbed after them, boots slipping on the iron plating. Wind roared around him, smoke from the stack choking the air. He rose into a crouch, revolver steady. The outlaws turned, one grinned behind his bandana. They charged. The first fired, grazing Pinkerton's sleeve. He shot back, dropping the man instantly. The second swung a club, but Pinkerton ducked, ramming his shoulder into the man's gut. They grappled dangerously near the edge. For a moment, the outlaw's strength pressed him back, boot heels scraping against the slick roof. Then, with a sudden twist, Pinkerton hurled him sideways. The man tumbled into the prairie, swallowed by dust. Below, the leader barked orders. Detach the car. Cut it loose. Outlaws swarmed toward the coupling between the baggage and the passenger coach. Their plan was clear: separate the payroll car, slow it, and vanish with the gold while the rest of the train rolled helplessly on. Pinkerton dropped down, racing across platforms. Hold the couplings, he shouted. Clymer braced himself with pistol drawn, firing point-blank at the men with axes. One fell, another staggered back, but a third hacked viciously at the chain. Sparks flew. Then, a whistle from the tree lean, another signal. More riders appeared, galloping hard, carrying sacks of spikes and chains. They meant to halt the entire train ahead, box it in with obstacles, then pick it apart at leisure. Pinkerton knew if they slowed, it was over. He surged forward into the engine cab, grabbing the engineer's arm. Full steam. Do not stop. But sir. Obey. The furnace roared, the pistons thundered, and the train surged faster. The sudden jolt threw the outlaws clinging to the sides into disarray. Two lost their grip, falling beneath the wheels with sickening finality. Others clung tighter, howling curses. In the passenger car, chaos erupted. A masked man burst through a window, revolver drawn. He fired into the ceiling, shouting for valuables. Passengers screamed, shoving purses and watches into his hands. Pinkerton stormed in, revolver leveled. The bandit turned, sneering. You're too late, old man. Pinkerton shot him before he could finish the sentence. The outlaw crumpled, his loot scattering across the floor. Gasps filled the car, but Pinkerton's expression remained carved in iron. Stay calm, he commanded the passengers. You are under my protection. Outside, the leader still rode beside the train, cloak billowing, his masked face fixed on Pinkerton. Their eyes met across the chaos. The man raised his pistol in salute, mocking, defiant, then wheeled his horse and vanished back toward the tree lean with the surviving riders. Within minutes, the prairie was empty again, save for bodies and broken equipment strewn in the train's wake. The express rattled onward, battered but intact. Guards cheered, passengers wept in relief, clerks clutched their chest of bonds. Pinkerton holstered his revolver, his face unreadable. The attack had failed, but the mystery remained. The leader had not been captured. Worse, someone aboard had aided the timing. As quiet returned, Pinkerton walked slowly through the cars, eyes passing over each passenger. The widow's veil still hid her face. The banker sweated profusely, clutching his chest. The journalist smirked faintly as he scribbled, as if the entire ordeal had been a story staged for him. Pinkerton's instincts bristled. The bandits had masks, but so did his fellow passengers. The difference was only cloth versus pretense. Somewhere among them sat the engineer, the man who orchestrated it all. And Allan Pinkerton intended to rip that mask away before the journey ended. Chapter 6, Secrets in the Sleeper Car. The attack had ended, but the Midnight Express was far from safe. Smoke still drifted through shattered windows, mingling with the acrid tang of gunpowder. The passengers, shaken but alive, settled into uneasy silence. Guards patched bullet holes with boards, and porters swept broken glass into sacks. The chest of payroll remained secured, but Pinkerton knew it was not iron bolts that preserved it, it was time. Time, and the narrowing distance between the train and its enemies regrouping somewhere out on the prairie. Yet Pinkerton's attention turned inward. The outlaws had been coordinated, their timing exact. That meant the enemy's eyes and ears were not only in the hills, they were here, inside these very cars. If the Midnight Express was to survive the rest of its journey, the traitor had to be exposed. He began in the sleeper car. Curtain swayed gently as the train rocked, lamplight flickering across polished brass. Most passengers had retreated there after the battle, seeking rest, but rest was fragile. Whispered prayers and muffled sobs filled the space. Pinkerton entered with deliberate calm, tipping his hat, offering reassurance where he could. Yet all the while his eyes catalogued every detail. The widow in black was seated by the window, veil drawn low. Her composure was unsettling. Others trembled, clutched at wounds, muttered in fear. She alone remained serene, sipping her tea as if nothing had transpired. Pinkerton watched the tilt of her cup, the steadiness of her hand. Mourning garb hid much, but not indifference. A few seats down sat the journalist, scribbling furiously despite the dim light. Pinkerton leaned closer, feigning casual curiosity. "You write a great deal, sir. Notes for tomorrow's edition?" The man looked up with sharp eyes. "History is being made, and I intend to capture it. You cannot object to truth." Pinkerton smiled faintly, though the pages he glimpsed were troubling. Symbols, loops, and abbreviations filled the sheets. Not shorthand for journalism, too obscure, too structured. Code. He made no accusation then, only filed it away. The army officers occupied a corner berth. Captain Price, the restless one, still eyed the baggage car as if measuring distance. His companion, Lieutenant Bragg, tried to calm him, but Price's agitation only grew. "We cannot allow this circus to continue," he muttered when Pinkerton passed. "The gold must be removed from the car at once. Transferred elsewhere." Pinkerton stopped, fixing him with a steady gaze. "And hand it to whom, Captain? To masked men waiting beyond the rails?" Price's jaw tightened. He muttered something about efficiency, but Pinkerton noted the beads of sweat on his brow. Soldiers were not immune to greed. Nor to treachery. Later, as the train settled into uneasy rhythm, Pinkerton called his men together in the narrow vestibule. McParlin reported first. "The widow never speaks unless spoken to," but one porter swore he saw her pass a folded slip beneath her parasol during the stop at Joliet. Clymer added, "The journalist's pages aren't notes. I checked the waste bin in the dining car, scraps with numbers, ciphers. Looks like signals." Pinkerton considered this. Both could be guilty. Or both could be pawns. And the soldiers? "Price pushes to move the gold," McParlin said. "As if eager to separate it from the rest of us." Pinkerton exhaled slowly, the lamplight catching the iron streaks in his beard. 3 suspects, 3 masks. The true hand behind them may be none, or all. But one name matters above all others, the one they call the engineer. As the night deepened, he devised a quiet test. He left the baggage car unguarded for a brief spell, a calculated risk. Agents watched discreetly through cracks in doors, pretending to rest. Within minutes, movement stirred. The journalist rose, walking toward the car, glancing about nervously. At the same time, Captain Price stood, claiming he needed fresh air, drifting the same direction. And from the shadows, the widow adjusted her veil and followed. 3 suspects, converging at once. Pinkerton stepped into their path. "Going somewhere?" he asked mildly, his revolver visible at his side. The widow froze. The journalist blanched, stuffing his papers deeper into his coat. Price stammered about needing to check the guards. "Interesting," Pinkerton said, voice cool as steel. "3 souls drawn to the same place at the same time, while the gold sits unguarded." Almost as if someone whispered a signal. The silence that followed was thick as smoke. None confessed, none dared move. Pinkerton let the moment stretch before dismissing them with a warning. "Return to your seats. The next who wanders without leave will be chained to his berth until Omaha." They obeyed, but their eyes lingered on him with unmasked hostility. That alone told Pinkerton he had rattled them. A guilty conscience always bristled at restraint. As dawn crept nearer, rain began to fall. Drops streaked the windows, blurring the endless prairie. The express thundered on, sparks flying from the wheels. Passengers dozed uneasily, but Pinkerton remained awake, pacing the narrow aisle, hand never far from his revolver. Near sunrise, McParlin approached with news. He had searched the journalist's satchel and found more coded pages, some bearing the same lantern sequence used in the yard. Proof of complicity. Yet Pinkerton's instincts whispered that the man was not the leader. He was too eager, too careless. A tool, not a mastermind. Pinkerton returned to the sleeper car, pausing beside the widow. She looked up, veil shifting just enough to reveal sharp eyes, alert and calculating. For the first time, she smiled faintly. It was not the smile of grief, but of recognition. Pinkerton knew then that she, too, played a part larger than her disguise allowed. And Captain Price? He still muttered of moving the gold, still shifted in his seat, restless as a man with secrets gnawing at him. 3 masks. 1 truth. The express rolled into a new stretch of wilderness, tracks gleaming wet under the storm. Pinkerton felt the journey tightening toward climax. The bandits outside would strike again. And when they did, the traitor inside would reveal himself, or herself. The sleeper car, with its drawn curtains and hushed voices, felt less like a refuge and more like a stage where the final act approached. Pinkerton set his jaw. The hour was coming when the mask of the engineer would be stripped away, no matter whose face lay beneath. Chapter 7, Duel on the Roof. By nightfall the storm had broken. The prairie lay cloaked in rain, lightning forked across the sky, and the midnight express barreled through it like a steel beast defying heaven itself. Water streamed down the windows, lamps flickered with every gust, and passengers huddled in fearful silence. The rails ahead glistened dangerously under the deluge, but the engineer kept his hand tight on the throttle, refusing to slow. Allan Pinkerton stood in the vestibule, cloak plastered to his shoulders, revolver heavy at his side. He could feel the tension pressing down, the sense that the next moment would shatter the fragile calm. His instincts, honed through decades of pursuit, told him the enemy would not wait until Omaha. They would strike here, in the storm, when chaos itself was their ally. And indeed, the signal came. A lantern blinked faintly in the distance through sheets of rain, 2 long flashes, 1 short. The same code he had tracked since Chicago. Moments later, the train jolted. Sparks shot from beneath the wheels. The express slowed despite the engineer's effort, brakes hissing as though seized by unseen hands. Sabotage again. Shouts rang out. McParlin raced forward from the baggage car, shouting, "They're here." Even through the storm, gunfire cracked. Masked figures appeared along the embankment, rifles spitting flame. 2 outlaws leapt aboard the rear coach, while others galloped alongside on foaming horses. But this time, their leader did not remain hidden. He emerged atop the mail car, a tall figure cloaked in oilskin, mask tied tight against the rain. In one hand he carried a revolver, in the other a signal lantern. He moved with a balance too sure for the slick surface, commanding his men with curt gestures. Lightning split the sky behind him, etching his form in silver. It was the engineer. Pinkerton did not hesitate. He climbed the iron ladder, boots slipping on wet rungs, wind lashing his face. When he pulled himself onto the roof, the storm roared in his ears, drowning all sound but thunder and the pounding wheels. Ahead, the masked figure turned, pistol raised. They faced each other across the slick roof, rain sheeting between them. For a moment, time seemed to freeze, the hunter and the hunted, balanced above a roaring abyss. Then the outlaw fired. The bullet sang past Pinkerton's ear, sparks leaping from iron. He dropped flat, returning fire. Their shots vanished into the storm, each man advancing cautiously, boots sliding on water-slick steel. Another flash of lightning revealed the outlaw's eyes through his mask, sharp, intelligent, cold. This was no mere bandit. This was a strategist who had worn many faces. The duel raged across the roof. They circled, fired, lunged, slipped, and recovered. Twice Pinkerton nearly lost his footing, saved only by his grip on a roof rail. Once the outlaw's shot grazed his coat, burning across his ribs. Yet Pinkerton pressed on, determination iron in his veins. Below, chaos reigned. McParlin and Clymer battled the intruders swarming through the cars. Passengers screamed, guards exchanged fire, sparks from gun barrels mingling with the storm. But none dared climb to the roof, where the true contest unfolded. At last, the two men closed the distance. Revolvers empty, they clashed hand to hand, grappling in the gale. The outlaw struck hard, his strength surprising, but Pinkerton answered with the grim power of a man who had survived riots, wars, and assassins. Their boots skidded dangerously close to the edge as the train thundered across a high trestle bridge. Below yawned a black ravine, river swollen with rain. The outlaw snarled, his voice carrying even through the storm. "You cannot stop progress, Pinkerton. The gold belongs to those bold enough to take it." Pinkerton gritted his teeth, forcing the man back. "You mistake greed for progress. And you mistake me for a man who lets thieves prosper." The outlaw drew a knife, gleaming in the lightning. He slashed, cutting Pinkerton's sleeve, nicking his arm. Pain flared, but Pinkerton seized the man's wrist, twisting with brutal precision. The blade clattered away, lost to the wind. They struggled, boots slipping, fists flying. A bolt of lightning struck nearby, blinding white. In that instant, Pinkerton tore away the outlaw's mask. Rain washed across a revealed face, the widow's calm smile transformed into a sneer. Not a grieving lady, but a cunning schemer cloaked in mourning garb. The engineer was a woman. Recognition flashed between them, but only for a breath. With renewed fury, she wrenched free, trying to shove him over the edge. Pinkerton anchored himself against a vent, muscles straining. With a final heave, he flung her backward. She struck the roof, rolled, and slid toward the precipice. For a moment she clung to the edge, eyes blazing defiance. "You'll never keep it," she spat. "Gold is a river, you can dam it, but it will break free." Then her grip failed. With a scream torn away by the storm, she plunged into the darkness below, swallowed by the raging river. Silence followed, broken only by thunder and the pounding of wheels. Pinkerton stood alone on the roof, chest heaving, rain stinging his wounds. The mastermind was gone, her conspiracy collapsing with her fall. Yet his relief was tempered by grim knowledge, many of her followers still fought below. He climbed down, rejoining his men in the baggage car. The bandits, leaderless, had begun to falter. McParlin drove them back with precise shots. Clymer clubbed one unconscious with his rifle butt, and guards forced the rest to retreat. Those who leapt from the train vanished into the storm, scattered like leaves. When at last the final shot faded and the wheels beat steady once more, Pinkerton holstered his revolver. "It's over," he said simply. His men nodded, weary but victorious. In the passenger car, shaken travelers murmured prayers of thanks. The banker collapsed over his chest of bonds, clerks sobbing with relief. The journalist scribbled furiously, eyes wide, as though even terror were ink for his tale. Few noticed the empty seat where the widow had once sat, her disguise now unmasked forever. The train rolled on through the storm, battered yet unbroken. Dawn glimmered faintly on the horizon, promising a hard-earned peace. But for Allan Pinkerton, there was no triumph, only the steady march of duty. He knew justice was not the end of a chase, it was the next station before another case began. The Midnight Express had survived its duel, and so had he. But the echoes of the storm, and the face revealed in lightning, would linger long in memory. Chapter 8, Justice at Dawn. The storm weakened as night gave way to a pale dawn. The clouds split, revealing streaks of fragile gold across the sky. Rainwater streamed from the roofs of the cars, dripping onto the soaked prairie below. The Midnight Express thundered forward, scarred but intact. Windows were shattered, bullet holes pocked its sides, and the baggage car bore the marks of axes and smoke, but the train had not been stopped. Inside, silence lingered after the battle. Passengers whispered in hushed tones, as though speaking too loudly might invite danger again. The banker sat hunched over his chest of bonds, trembling but unwilling to release his grip. The army officers remained stiff-backed, faces pale beneath their bravado. The journalist scribbled still, though his pages were wet, his ink bleeding into blurred shapes. None asked where the widow had gone. Her absence was answer enough. Pinkerton moved through the cars, pausing to speak softly to the frightened. His presence alone steadied them, the weight of his voice like a hand on the shoulder. He did not tell them the truth of what had occurred on the roof, that the mastermind of the conspiracy had been the woman they had trusted as a grieving widow. He spared them that revelation for now. It was enough that the leader was gone, cast into the raging river, her body claimed by waters she had thought to command. In the baggage car, McParlin and Jonas Clymer guarded the strongboxes. Their faces were drawn, eyes shadowed with fatigue, but both men remained vigilant. Pinkerton joined them, glancing at the battered chest that had drawn so much bloodshed. "It remains intact," McParlin said. "But for gold that never belonged to them, many men have died." Pinkerton's gaze was steady. "That is the way of greed, it devours more lives than bullets." When the train reached the small junction town of Council Bluffs, the platform swarmed with railway officials and deputies who had ridden ahead by telegraph order. News of the attempted robbery had spread already. Crowds gathered to glimpse the express as it screeched to a halt, its battered state proof of the night's ordeal. Pinkerton stepped onto the platform, his coat torn, his arm bandaged, yet his posture unbowed. The officials swarmed him with questions, but he spoke plainly. "The conspiracy is broken," he said. "The bandits scattered, their leader lost. But mark me well, the rot lay not only outside these rails. It lay within. Someone in your own company fed information to her." A hush fell over the officials. Winthrop, the executive who had begged for Pinkerton's help, paled. "Do you know who?" Pinkerton reached into his coat and produced the coded pages taken from the journalist's satchel. He held them aloft. "Here is proof enough. This man was no journalist. His notes are cipher, his articles a disguise. He was the signaler, the hand that whispered where and when. The so-called journalist protested, but deputies seized him, prying away his satchel. The ciphers spoke louder than his words. He had been no more than an accomplice, a link in the chain. Pinkerton explained calmly that the widow had been the mastermind, the one the outlaws had called the engineer. She had disguised herself with mourning garb, earning sympathy even as she directed their moves. Her fall from the train had ended her schemes, but her allies must be rooted out in full. By noon, Pinkerton and his men delivered sworn statements, detailing every step of the assault. The federal marshal commended their bravery, yet Pinkerton brushed aside praise. The express arrived with its passengers alive and its cargo intact. That is all that matters. My men require rest, not speeches. The passengers disembarked under escort. Some kissed the ground, others clutched their belongings tighter than ever. The banker bowed stiffly to Pinkerton, muttering gratitude. The army officers saluted with embarrassed stiffness, ashamed of their agitation during the fight. Only the journalist, now exposed as traitor, was led away in irons, his head bowed in defeat. When the platform cleared, Pinkerton sat alone on a bench, pipe in hand. Smoke curled upward, mingling with the scent of wet earth. His eyes followed the endless rail stretching westward, glittering in the sunlight. Trains would keep running. Gold would keep moving. And so long as greed existed, men would try to seize it. McParlin sat beside him, weary but smiling faintly. "We did it, Chief. The express is safe. The widow is gone. The gang scattered. What more could you want?" Pinkerton drew on his pipe, exhaling slowly. "Justice is never complete, McParlin. There will be another express, another scheme. We close this chapter, but the book remains open." Clymer approached, carrying a ledger salvaged from the widow's abandoned berth. "Look at this," he said, handing it over. The pages, though water-damaged, revealed names, officials, bankers, even a railway accountant, each beside sums of money. Bribes, debts, promises. The conspiracy had reached farther than the outlaws with rifles. It had reached into polished offices. Pinkerton closed the book. "There is the true enemy," he murmured. "Not the men with guns, but the men in suits who sell them the maps." As afternoon stretched, the Midnight Express was prepared to continue its journey, patched but still running. Pinkerton, however, would not ride further. His task was done. He arranged for the strongboxes to reach Omaha under guard, his men escorting them. He himself would return to Chicago, where already another case waited. Before he boarded the eastbound train, Winthrop clasped his hand. "You have saved not only our cargo but our reputation. Chicago owes you." Pinkerton shook his head. "You owe me nothing. Strengthen your walls, choose your men wisely, and remember, betrayal always begins within." The whistle blew, the train departed, and Pinkerton stood alone on the platform a moment longer. The prairie stretched wide, the sky vast above. He felt the ache in his arm, the weariness in his bones, but also the certainty that this was his life, chasing shadows, uncovering schemes, standing guard where others faltered. As the sun set that evening, Allan Pinkerton leaned against the rail of the departing train, eyes fixed on the horizon. The Midnight Express had carried its gold and its secrets, but it had also carried the mask of a widow, the face of a traitor, and the proof that vigilance could not rest. The journey was over, but the work was endless. And for Allan Pinkerton, that was enough.